Britain needs more migration. Yes, you heard that right. That's what the journalists and the politicians are putting out at the moment. You see, whatever problem there is with society, the answer is always more migration. Falling birth rates, more migration. We need some workers to do some particular task, more migration. It's always the solution, except it really isn't, and that's what we're going to get into in this video. Now look, I'm going to say a few things in this video which are controversial, and I really do mean that. Some of you won't like it, some of you are probably going to unsubscribe, especially as I get towards the end of the video. That's okay. Look, my mind isn't set on any of these positions. I'm just willing to entertain them as possible solutions. You may not like that, we can discuss it in the comments. I'm always open to hearing your thoughts. You may change my mind completely, and that's a good thing. Right, let's get into it. What did Tory Lord Philip Hammond say just a couple of days ago?
But in order to deliver the effect, the growth effect, there will have to be some additional managed migration. We will need more workers, possibly only for short-term workers, but we will need more foreign workers in order to deliver the homes and the infrastructure that the government is proposing to build. And politically, that's going to be very challenging. And if I was the government, I think that's where I'd be focusing my attention now, persuading the public that over the next 4 or 5 years, in order to deliver all this growth-promoting infrastructure and house building, we will need to bring in some foreign construction workers.
Well, in that video, you heard Lord Hammond saying quite clearly, we need more migration in order to have growth and to build houses. Interesting, except we've had a massive spike in immigration over the past 5 years. And where did the growth go? Because we didn't seem to get any, did we? It didn't seem to work. And are none of those 5 million or so people that we brought here able to build houses? Or do they all work in kebab shops and halal butchers? Now, you might think I'm exaggerating and joking and being facetious, but I'm not. You see, one halal butcher alone brought 918 people to the UK on skilled work visas. Yeah, I'm sure there's nothing suspicious going on there. I'm so surprised that these skilled work visas didn't bring us any growth to the economy. The second point that Hammond raises is that we need migrants who can build houses in the country. But why is that? Why is that the case? I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, because the cost of housing is so extortionate compared to salaries. And that's true. It's the worst it's ever been since the Victorian era. But why is that happening? I mean, really think about it. Birth rates have been declining in this country for a long time. In fact, the fertility rate has been below the replacement rate for 50 years. This country should be getting smaller. The population simply should be declining. Pressure on housing should be easing. They should be very, very affordable, and yet they're not. What's going on? Well, we know what's going on, right? All of the population growth in this country is caused by migration, by mass migration. Not only that, obviously the population grows, but your salaries get pushed lower and lower. Why? Because there's an international market of cheap labor just willing to come in and work for pennies compared to what you perhaps feel like your time is worth. And that's how we get into this problem. Your salaries stay low, but the population increases, pressure on housing increases, and life is just miserable for everybody. That's the problem. Mass migration. And the Tory solution, more mass migration. You really can't make this stuff up. It's beyond ridiculous. Thirdly, Hammond says that we need migration into the country to spur on growth. But it's nonsense. It's never going to happen. The data tells us that this is never going to happen. Not British data, of course, because they won't release it, but Danish data. And if you look at the Danish data, it paints a very clear picture. Migrants from the Middle East, North Africa, Pakistan, and Turkey never, as a group, never on average contribute more to the state than they take out. They are always net drains. Even at like the peak of their productivity around 35 years old, they are still, as a group, a drain on the state. How exactly is that going to bring growth to the country when that's where most of our migration comes from? It's simply not. That's not going to work. All that's going to happen is that the burden on the state increases dramatically with this mass migration, and now everyone else's taxes have to go up to fund it. Increasing taxes is not how you get growth. This is total nonsense. Mass migration, if it was from America or Norway, we might be talking about a different picture, but that's not where our migration comes from. It comes from Africa, the Middle East, okay? And it is not benefiting the country. If it is, why don't the British government show you the data to actually prove that? But they won't.
50% of people from the Congo in Britain live at public expense. Why are we importing people from the Congo? What possible reason do we have to import people from that godforsaken country to live in the West when we can see that they are of little benefit? They're not going to be doctors and engineers. Now, the overall picture is of importing very, very low quality human capital and creating all sorts of cultural problems.
So what exactly is the solution to the house building problem if it's not bringing in bricklayers from Ghana? Well, what if we trained our own kids? What if we encouraged our own British youth to go into the trades, to learn a trade, rather than going to university? I mean, really think about it. Ever since Blair pushed for 50% of British kids to go to university, things have just got worse and worse for them. And I'm not just talking about the tuition fee rises, which now saddles basically all of them with a large amount of debt, but also the graduate salaries have declined and declined and declined. So there's barely any difference between a graduate salary now and a non-graduate salary. There is a little bit of a difference, of course there is. But all of these kids think that they're going to go to university and come out with a 70 grand a year graduate job. But that's simply not going to happen. A lot of jobs, even like working as a secretary now, you need a degree for. Why? That is completely insane. It doesn't have to be like that. We should be encouraging our youth to learn trades. If you really want to earn 50, 60, 70 grand a year, go and be a plumber. Go and be an electrician. These are vital, essential services in our country. We need them more than we need your art history degree from the 98th best university in the country. Okay, that's not needed. We don't need that. And you don't need that either. You're just being saddled with debt. A lot of it. Now look, it's not just Hammond talking about this, saying that we need more migration into Britain. I read an article in the Telegraph just a couple of days ago that was saying basically the same thing, although their reasoning was slightly different. They were referring to data surrounding fertility rates. The fertility rate to keep the population stable, as most of you will know, is about 2.1. Every woman needs to have about 2.1 children. I know you can't have 2.1 children, but on average, and that will keep the population stable. It won't grow or it won't decrease, not significantly anyway. But our birth rate declined in the 1970s following the introduction of the Abortion Act, so abortion became legal. That's probably to be expected, right? If we're totally honest, that would have an effect on birth rates. It dropped to about 1.8, where it stayed for decades, and then more recently it's declined, causing all of this panic, down to 1.44. Now, 1.8 as a birth rate isn't necessarily that problematic as far as I can tell. Yes, your population will shrink, but it will shrink at a manageable rate. Okay, there will still be enough people to pay the pensions and upkeep the NHS and things like that. The population will shrink, but it will be manageable. 1.44, on the other hand, that's a slightly different matter. That is a very rapid decline in the population over a couple of decades. Now, here's the problem with the article. They identify a problem correctly, and then they just assume that they know what the cause is. And here's what they say. Experts have suggested that more women are choosing to prioritize careers or buying a house over having a baby, meaning many are having children later in life or not at all. And that's really a mistake on the author's part, I think, anyway. It assumes that they're just choosing this. But think about it. Imagine that you're a 25-year-old woman or a man and you actually really want to start a family. What are some of the preconditions that you might have in your mind for actually being able to raise children correctly? You would probably want a house and a stable job. And yet those two things are actually becoming increasingly more difficult to secure in this country. It's not that people are now choosing to prioritize their career and having a house over other things. It's that 40, 50, 60 years ago, those things were a lot easier to attain. And so, yes, 25-year-olds could then start families because they were able to get that security very early on in life. They were able to have a house, pay off a good amount of the mortgage. They were able to have a good job with a good salary that was reliable. And that is just not the world we live in anymore. And again, I don't want to bang the drum too hard, but we know why that is, right? We know why house prices have gone up and why salaries have stagnated. Mass migration. Now, the other topic, which this article totally fails to consider, is abortion. And this is where I'm definitely going to anger a few of you, but hear me out. In this country, every year, there are about 300,000 abortions that take place. 1 in 3 conceptions ends in abortion. And of these 300,000, the vast majority are elective. There is no reason given. So we're not talking about, assaults on the women, and we're not talking about for medical reasons. What we're really talking about is a very late form of contraception. Now, hypothetically, if abortion were not legal in this country, and say 280,000 more children were born every year as a result of this, the birth rate situation would magically resolve itself, okay? That problem would just disappear. So is it time we actually had a meaningful discussion about this? Well, I promised I would be a little bit controversial in this video, and I think questioning the legality of abortion is right up there as one of the most controversial things you can say. I'm sure that there are lots of feminists who would balk at this idea. I do understand that. Probably it's about the worst thing you could say to them, other than maybe we're going to take the vote away from women. But think about it. Is this feminist, postmodern utopia of Britain that we're living in today actually really that great? I think not. And there are loads of religious arguments for why this should be illegal, and that's not the kind of argument I'm making. I'm making a purely utilitarian one. We have falling birth rates. The only solution ever given to us is, well, we need more mass migration from Africa into the country, and there is never any consideration of any other possible solution, like the one I've just outlined. I think it is time that we at least consider this as an option. Now, if we're going to have that discussion, then there's another one that we need to have too, and that surrounds societal perspectives on parenthood. You see, I think we've got this all wrong. I think parenthood should be one of the greatest social focuses for any country. It's how you build the future generations. It's how you make your country better and better and better over different iterations. In the past, people understood this, but now they just don't seem to. I remember when I was growing up, people would chastise and mock and laugh at young parents, young mothers, especially if they were single. They would be mocked, which is totally, totally wrong. Think about the burden that they have chosen to take on their life, right? By raising this child, doing the best that they can for that child, and then the rest of society just mocks them. It's awful. It's totally, totally wrong. Another idea that I've seen suggested is, well, what if we offered to pay mothers the minimum wage until their child reaches a certain age, say 11 years old, right? Then they're in secondary school. By doing that, you ensure that there is always a safety net for those mothers, as well as a great deal of encouragement for people to start having children. Perhaps a policy like that alone would be enough to increase the birth rate without resorting to measures like criminalising abortion, for example. I also want to stress that because I'm not making a religious argument for criminalising abortion, situations like assault on the mother or for medical reasons are absolutely valid reasons still to have an abortion. What I'm talking about is the people who simply choose to as a form of contraception. Do I necessarily think that that should be outlawed? I don't know. But I do think that it's an argument we should at least be considering. I will hear arguments on both sides, points on both sides, points about liberty, rights to your own body, things like that. As well as, different arguments. If you want to make religious arguments, then I will, of course, listen to them. Look, that's where I'm going to wrap the video up. I think I've said enough to lose a couple of thousand subscribers, which will probably happen. I'll make a community post about it if that does happen. I think it'll be interesting. Let me know your thoughts. Again, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. I had some great comments on the last video about the Chagos Islands because I couldn't figure out what on earth was going on. Like, why was Trump doing the things he was doing? And some of you had some really novel, interesting suggestions about why it could be. So I found that really fascinating. I do read the comments. I don't always reply to them. I try and reply to as many as I can. I can't always reply to them because there's so many. Often I'll just leave a little like and you'll see that I've read it. But yeah, let me know what you guys are thinking. And till the next one, like, comment, subscribe.